Hi guys! Today we'll be recapping a story called I'm the Tyrant's Secretary. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot. Enjoy! Rosaline has worked for the tyrant yet legendary emperor of the Atheist Empire, Kahur, for 5 years. Now she finally dares to tell him what she wants. When the man promises to give her whatever she desires, she declares that she wants to retire from her position. However, the reaction she receives is different from what she expected. The emperor is furious, in disbelief that she would dare to ask for that. He menacingly tells her that the only way for her to quit is for her to die. That is too much, Mr. Emperor. I don't think that is how you should treat your employees. Just how did Rosaline manage to get herself into this situation? Well, we need to start from the beginning then. In Seoul, she is originally living as a secretary for 6 years to support her siblings. When she finally resigns from the company, she is more than ready to live her own life. The day she resigns, she discovers an exciting novel entitled Taming the Tyrant's Heart. And what better way to celebrate her freedom than by reading it? However, rather than being drawn to the main character's woes, she naturally sympathizes with the poor secretary, tasked with doing the most impossible things for the emperor's whim. Unbeknownst to her, the very next day, she wakes up in a completely different world. She has entered the novel itself. At first, she is unwilling to survive in this unfamiliar world, so she does all she can to return to her world. Determined to die, she does all kinds of dangerous things, from poking beehives to eating poisonous plants. But to no avail, she just won't die. That is when she makes up her mind. She will now live as Rosaline Verite, since she can't go back anyway. Once she thinks about it, life as Rosaline is actually quite great. A well-off family, a beautiful appearance, a wardrobe of fancy dresses, what more can she ask for? On top of that, she's a loving family who will do anything for her. Most importantly, Rosaline Verite is an extra, which means she doesn't have to get involved with the main characters. What a perfect life! This is what she thought, but she fails to remember an important little detail. Her brother Roy has been chosen to be the emperor's secretary. When she checks the novel, she finds out that Roy will fail to confirm Kahur's schedule, which keeps him from dining with Ella, the female lead. This tiny mistake enrages the emperor, which leads to the death of their entire family. What? That is extreme! Meanwhile, in the imperial palace, Kahur is once again giving his chief secretary, Derek, a hard time. He demands that he find a new secretary at once, even threatening his life if he fails to do so. Derek then has no choice but to search for a new secretary in the middle of the night. That is how he ends up meeting with Viscount Verite to inform him that his son Roy has been chosen as His Majesty's secretary. The Viscount can't believe his ears. Despite how honorable the position is, he knows about the Emperor's temper as well as his lack of mercy for those who are incompetent. His son is too soft, so how can he send him to such a tyrant? He tries to talk his way out of it, but the chief secretary is adamant. Derek even shows him that the Emperor has already sent the Imperial Secretary's mark, which means there is no way that he can refuse. Resigned, the Viscount orders for his son to be fetched. However, the person who comes to greet them is none other than his precious daughter Rosaline, claiming to want to go in her brother's stead. The poor Viscount is shocked that his sweet baby wants to be the tyrant's secretary. Out of dismay, he even ends up fainting. We can only imagine how stressed he is right now. Meanwhile, Rosaline is already being congratulated by Derek, handing her the summary of the work she'll be doing. With determination to save all their lives, Rosaline accepts. That night, Rosaline wonders if interfering with the flow of the story is the right thing to do, but she has to do it to survive. The next morning, everyone is gathered in her room, worried for her upcoming employment. Her poor mother is in tears, and her father assures her that Roy can still go in her place. Even her brother is willing to go for her. Her parents even think that she is doing this because she doesn't have enough dresses and jewelry. Her father then assures her that he has invested in a gold mine, so he can surely provide her with what she wants. Rosaline knows about that unfortunate investment, and she knows that it's a scam. In the novel, that false gold mine drained their finances, and the reason why Roy couldn't retire even after the employment period. Roy is not an effective secretary, which results in her failing to attend to his arrangement with Ella. That one little mistake will cost them all their lives. She promises her family that she will only work for the Emperor for 5 years. Of course, they question why it has to be so, but she can't just tell them that the original timeline of their death will have passed by then, and so she reasons that she'll be 23 by then, which means that she has to get married. Later on, Rosaline arrives at the Imperial Palace to face the Emperor. She greets him graciously. However, the Emperor ends up gritting his teeth in anger. For some reason, Kahur is displeased with her. But why? What's gotten you cranky, Mr. Emperor? Rosaline is quite perplexed. Did she do something wrong? The Emperor rises from his throne to approach her. As he nears her, all she can think about is how the author of the novel certainly did not exaggerate when describing Kahur's beauty. In fact, his appearance is not something that can be fully expressed through writing. However, the words he says to her are not as pleasant as his face. He declares that he hates women. Even Derek is confused since this is the first time hearing this. The Emperor even orders an investigation on her simply because she has haughty eyes. How unreasonable can this person be? You're not supposed to react like this as a first impression, Kahur. Rosaline tries to placate him by offering to change whatever it is he hates about her. Right then, Kahur tells her that he hates her for being prettier than him, challenging her to change that. What? This dude is acting out because he is starstruck by her. Rosaline knows that she can't simply back down, so she resorts to shamelessly complimenting the Emperor, claiming that there is no way for her to compare to his splendor. She then declares that she wants to be in the shadow that serves the Empire's sun. She also markets her good qualities that will certainly be useful as the Emperor's secretary. The Emperor eventually gives in, ordering Derek to show Rosaline to the room next to his. However, he's only willing to give her a week to prove just how useful she is. Rosaline and Derek internally celebrate upon hearing his decision. Later on, Rosaline meets Hui, the maid tasked to assist her. Hui then leads her through the Imperial Palace. However, when she asks to rest, Hui becomes really anxious, not wanting to stay in that particular area. Turns out that the palace belongs to the Dowager Empress, Agela Monica Beluache, Kahur's greatest enemy. Unfortunately, they still end up face to face with her. Just looking at her face, we can clearly see she is nothing but despicable. Rosaline and Hui greet the Dowager Empress respectfully, but this woman acts unpleasant nonetheless. When she learns Rosaline's family name, she insults her family, declaring them shabby with nothing to offer. Ugh, get over yourself, woman! I don't see why you have to be so horrid for no reason. This, of course, angers Rosaline. In a pleasant manner, she backhandedly expresses how sorry she is for the death of the Empress's brother, which means that the Beluache's legacy will no longer continue. This visibly angers the Dowager Empress, who resorts to declaring that her son will not let such an insult on her pass. She then asks how she should punish Rosaline for her insolence, claiming that she deserves to die for her rudeness. Oh no, Kahur better save her! Meanwhile, Derek rushes to inform the Emperor about Rosaline's situation, begging him to interfere. At first, Kahur doesn't seem to be interested in doing anything about it. Don't you dare, Kahur! I will personally dive into this novel myself if you don't! He then imagines all the dreadful things that the Dowager Empress could be doing to Rosaline. He realizes that he doesn't want to see Rosaline in that situation. Back in the Imperial Halls, Rosaline stands her ground. She states that the Dowager Empress's relationship with the Emperor is quite contrary to what she claims. With a bright smile on her face, she even tells the woman that she needs to stop saying that she raised the Emperor with love, for clearly she did not. This also means that the Emperor will not get upset with what she's saying, so there will be no reason to punish her. OMG, our Rosaline sure knows how to bite back! The Dowager Empress is seething at this point. She raises her hand to strike Rosaline, but someone catches it. It's the Emperor. Kahur declares that his secretary did not say anything wrong. Surprising everyone, the Emperor even states that he will take the punishment instead. The Dowager Empress backs down at this point, deciding that she'll let Rosaline live for now to use her in the future. After that event, Rosaline follows the Emperor through the garden. Suddenly, Kahur faces her to question why exactly she wants to become his secretary. At first, she sticks with her earlier tactic, flattering the Emperor to no end, but he is not having it now. Threateningly, he demands that she tell the truth. Rosaline gives in, blurting out that she came instead of her brother. Surprisingly, the Emperor laughs out loud, asking her to continue talking. He even tosses his crown to her, expecting her to catch it. Rosaline reasons that she replaced her brother because he has a weak body. Sensing that this is not the whole truth, the Emperor becomes menacing again. When Rosaline gestures that Derek and Hui are following close behind them, Kahur understands that the lady doesn't want them to know the reason, so he orders them to step away. What he did not expect, however, is when she steps closer to him, intending to whisper to him. She tells him then that her brother doesn't have much sense, and she fears that he will only upset him. Meanwhile, Derek is full-on panicking, knowing that the Emperor simply does not allow anyone to touch him like that. He fears for the worst, but then he is in disbelief when the Emperor laughs out loud instead. That's probably not something he sees every day from Mr. Cranky Pants over there. He asks for her name once again, and after she gives it, he shakes her hand, welcoming her as an official secretary. Suddenly, a bird from a tree nearby attempts to drop a bird bomb on Rosaline. Kahur acts swiftly and pulls Rosaline to him in the most swoon-worthy moment ever. Rosaline is flustered because of their closeness. The Emperor then leans closer, whispering that as a punishment for offending the Dowager Empress, she is to write all his achievements in the 1,000-Day War and give them to him tomorrow. At first, Rosaline is shocked by such a short deadline, but she is not someone who backs down easily. She is definitely up to the Emperor's challenge. Meanwhile, Hui is gushing to Derek how the two have some sort of spark between them, claiming that it will eventually ignite. We agree, Hui. Years later, the spark that actually ignited, way before our two main leads, was the one between Derek and Hui. Derek even claims that the spark has been transferred to them. The chief secretary is definitely in love. However, Hui is disappointed, for she has been agonizing about this for 5 years. How can Rosaline remain single all this time? All she ever does is work. Hui fears that Rosaline will die having been single her whole life. Meanwhile, even though it is late at night, she has only now finished her work. She recalls the changes that have occurred since becoming a secretary. Roy is now married and has children. The gold mine situation has been resolved, and her parents are now living peacefully. Most important of all, they survived. It is time for her to return home. However, there is one problem. The heroine is yet to appear. The female lead, Ella Paulos, is described as a woman who is pretty as a lily. Kahur and her are supposed to meet a year ago at his birthday banquet, falling in love at first sight. But how can they fall in love if they haven't met yet? She only has to make sure that Kahur and Ella meet. This is the only way she can enjoy her YOLO. The next day, she comes to meet the Emperor. She realizes how tired he is, so she schedules him for a hot spring bath. She needs him to be in a good mood if she is to mention the banquet. As the Emperor is leaving, Rosaline has to force him to wear his crown again. Their adorable bickering causes the maids to gush at how much they suit each other. I certainly agree with you guys. They should just drop everything and get married. When he asks her if she thinks he is a tyrant, Rosaline answers no, and that they only have to fix the state affairs to help his reign. With a smile on his face, Kahur leads the way to the conference room. The moment they arrive, an official with blood on his forehead drops before the Emperor. He confesses to a traitorous act he has committed, asking for forgiveness. Even so, Kahur instantly orders for his execution. The Marquis frantically tells him that he has returned the ill-gotten wealth 100 times and even gave up half of his land, all so his life would be spared. However, the Emperor refuses to listen, ready to strike him down with his sword. The official desperately looks at Rosaline, for it was her advice that he has followed, the reason why he confessed in the first place. Sighing, Rosaline asks permission to speak. With an amused look, the Emperor grants it. Rosaline then declares that death is much too light to be a punishment for the Marquis's sin. She suggests that the official's lands and properties be confiscated instead. Of course, the Emperor agrees without question, ordering the Marquis to be dragged out even as the man begs for his death instead, not wanting to live as a poor noble. Later on, Rosaline is trying to work, but it is proving to be quite difficult when the handsome Emperor is staring intently at her. She tries to tell him that she'll hand over everything to him later, but he claims to want to wait for it. Kahur, you're becoming more obvious. When he eventually leaves, Rosaline is relieved to be left in her devices. She has noticed how the Emperor has been acting strange lately, especially since he smiles whenever he looks at her. The guy is clearly in love with you. Later on, after the Emperor finishes his bath, Rosaline gets flustered upon seeing the state he is in. Nonetheless, she serves him his tea and finally broaches the topic of the upcoming banquet for the Empress Dowager's birthday. At first, the Emperor is reluctant, for he is not interested in events like that. But with a bit of brilliant maneuvering by claiming that they needed to raise the Emperor's reputation, the Emperor eventually gives in. This guy basically agrees to whatever she wants. It is late at night, and they are once again working overtime. The moment the Emperor declares that they are finished, Derek is out the door in an instant. Rosaline is betting all her possessions that he's going straight to Hui's room. As she cleans up a bit, she gets a paper cut. Kahur notices and takes her hand to check on it. He then gives her a shock of her life when he orders that the supplier of the paper be killed. He then comments that her hands are too small and that she has been carrying all those heavy piles of papers with her small hands all this time. Only when Rosaline calls out to him does he realize that he's been holding her hands for too long. Flustered, Kahur lets go in an instant. He orders her to rest since there are delegations set to arrive tomorrow. Rosaline answers that even if she gets off late, she will make sure that everything is prepared by then. Kahur becomes frustrated that she misinterpreted his words, so he demands that she go rest before storming out of the room, leaving Rosaline to question why he's angry. She gets even more confused when she finally leaves the office, only to find him waiting for her. He personally pushes her inside her bedroom and takes the paperwork in her hands, ordering her to stay and rest in her room until he comes and gets her in the morning. Unfortunately, Rosaline is so bewildered by his behavior that she does not get much sleep. True to his words, the Emperor knocks at her door in the morning, prompting her to get ready in an instant. After the meeting with the delegates, the Emperor instantly comments on how tired she looks. He demands that the banquet be cancelled if she's going to wither away like this. He even scolds poor Derek for not helping out. He then orders all the itineraries to be cancelled so Rosaline can rest. As he walks out, he angrily tells her not to follow. Aw, our cranky Emperor is concerned. A little aggressive, but he's getting there. When the day for the banquet arrives, the Emperor comes to personally pick a dress for Rosaline. She is confused, especially since she has a lot of things to prepare, but the Emperor insists that she not wear her simple outfit to the banquet later. Apparently, she is going to dance with the Emperor later, for he has chosen her as his partner. Rosaline is appalled, especially since she is expecting Ella to appear that day. That woman is known to be jealous, and she can't afford to be hated by her. Suddenly, Kahur touches her hair, claiming that she needs to get it together, even if she is beyond happy right now that she gets to dance with him. He gives her the dress he picked, ordering her to do as he says. Suddenly, he takes off his shirt to change, telling her to take her leave. However, upon seeing his oh-so-enchanting physique, Rosaline is frozen in place for a moment while the maids practically fainted. Understandable! I would do the same thing! Eventually, the ball commences, but despite its opulence and splendor, the atmosphere is stifling due to the tension between the Emperor and the Dowager Empress. Even when they speak with each other, the bite behind their words is ever present. Kahur is getting impatient, not wanting to stay longer than necessary. He needs Rosaline to arrive as soon as possible so they can dance and he can finally leave. Meanwhile, Rosaline is rushing to get to the banquet, knowing how impatient the Emperor can be. Suddenly, she gets a glimpse of someone familiar. Blonde hair, pale skin, and green eyes? It can only be Ella Paulos. The female lead has finally appeared. But wait a minute, did Ella just glare at Rosaline? Rosaline looks a bit troubled, though she decides it best to shake off worrying about minor issues. Besides, today's the day the Emperor finally meets Ella, so she's pretty excited for this. Meanwhile, the Emperor himself keeps asking Derek, for the fourth time actually, for Rosaline's whereabouts. Unfortunately, he has no answer. The Queen Mother informs Emperor Kahur that the dance music will soon play, and advises him that he should participate in the first dance. Kahur just stated that his partner hasn't arrived yet. Though the Empress Dowager jokingly says a partner isn't required of him, internally, she was shocked because the Emperor had one in the first place. Like a coincidence, a lady, who catches the attention of the party easily, makes her way towards the Emperor. She is no other than Ella, the daughter of Count Paulos. Rosaline beams up with delight in a corner, seeing the male and female lead finally meet. Though she says her work is finally done, she can't help notice a strange feeling. Rosaline thinks it might be because of fatigue, but she gets interrupted by Derek. Apparently, he's been looking for her for the Emperor's first dance, but Rosaline points to Kahur and Ella meeting, saying that there's no need for that anymore. And so, she sends Derek back to have his own first dance, which he's tearfully thanked her for. At first, she thinks about her dress being wasted, but again, Rosaline's strange thoughts and misunderstood feelings, particularly about Kahur and Ella meeting, begin to surface again. She even admits she feels lonely too. She gets snapped back to reality though when the Emperor himself had apparently made his way to her. Rosaline tries to excuse herself, but Kahur is intent on having his first dance with her, albeit with a little blackmailing. Poor Derek was about to get punished. Anyway, it's safe to say that he and Rosaline dancing manages to captivate the crowd. As they dance away, however, the Queen Mother and Ella particularly get infuriated. Impressed by the Emperor's skills, Rosaline can't help but comment on it as they dance away during the banquet. Kahur, with an air of confidence, merely states that he's that good, and geniuses have no use for practice, when Rosaline guessed that he must have done so. Confident, aren't we, Kahur? In fact, he's in such a good mood that he allows a little bit of banter that he usually considers disrespectful. Unfortunately, not everyone is happily looking on to them. The Empress Dowager frowns in anger as Rosaline keeps on ruining her plans, for the past 5 years in the making. Still, Ella is there, and if she manages to marry her to Kahur, then essentially she will have everything in her grasp, with no one to stand in her way. Like a puppeteer playing with her puppets. Back to Rosaline and Kahur, almost everyone gives them room to dance in the middle of the floor. Rosaline tells him it's a little unfair that this is her first dance at her first banquet, while it wasn't for him. Kahur clears up the confusion though, promising that this is the first time he's asked someone to dance, not the other way around. By the time the music ends, Kahur formally bows to his partner, saying he enjoyed their time together. He says he has to go back, entertaining the Queen Mother that is, so Rosaline says she's going to oversee the banquet. Upon learning this, Kahur chooses to stay too, leading Rosaline to wonder if he worries about her. She feels a gaze fall upon her and finds it was Ella, so Rosaline leaves her and Kahur alone. Rosaline finds herself at the gardens, thinking about Ella and her fierce stare, though she concludes she has to let the two leads of the story meet. Suddenly, she notices Ella approach her. When Rosaline tries to leave, she grabs her. Ella reveals she knows the truth that Rosaline isn't of this world. In fact, Ella is the same. Really? Initially, she accuses of sabotaging the story, which embarrasses Rosaline, but upon hearing her side, Ella says they should meet, along with the Emperor, tomorrow for tea. While walking alone, Rosaline contemplates how Ella, the female lead, is possessed, same as she was. The eruption of the fireworks distracts her, but her gaze shifts to the balcony with Emperor Kahur, the Empress Dowager, and the smiling Ella. Ella, who was supposed to be the kind and vulnerable person to others, who became courageous after meeting and falling in love with Kahur. But the Ella Rosaline met is nothing like that. Regardless, since Ella is the female lead of the story, it's best not to get onto her bad side. And so ends the banquet. Kahur is being attended to, and Rosaline is at the sidelines waiting as usual. When one of the maids notices her being sleepy, she advises her to rest, though she doesn't. Kahur then calls his secretary, telling Rosaline to ban banquets as of now, reasoning that it feels empty without her by his side. I wonder if it's intentional that he sounds so romantic. He also says that he spent enough time with the Empress Dowager, revealing his attitude that gets Rosaline so worried. Anyway, Rosaline eventually gets some time to herself, admiring the beauty of the day. She also tends Kahur during his tea time, though the Emperor seems vexed by the lack of knowledge by the other lords for business meetings. Kahur does have everything, but as Rosaline notes, it seems a good personality is too much for him. Suddenly, Rosaline hears a familiar voice, and she looks to find Ella being stopped by the guards. Ella, innocent as one can be, calls to her after explaining to the guards and asks if Rosaline has forgotten the meeting. Actually, it's more like she can't believe Ella really came. Regardless, since she's already here, Rosaline asks Ella to wait for a bit as she goes back to inform the Emperor. But when Ella suddenly formally bows, Rosaline looks back to find Kahur already standing near her. Kahur plainly asks who their guest was, so Ella introduces herself again, saying that they met at the banquet. However, she also says she's Rosaline's friend. The look of shock is painted all over Rosaline's face. The Emperor doesn't understand as well, but when Rosaline starts to explain, she notices Kahur and Ella looking at each other eye to eye, which makes her wonder whether or not destined love, the thing that is mentioned throughout the novel, is really at work. But rather unexpectedly, Kahur grabs Rosaline's hand, all the while inviting her would-be friend for tea. During tea time, though, he mostly kept to himself, thinking how a girl backed by the Empress Dowager could be friends with Rosaline. He ponders if he missed something with her, but he pretends all is fine when Ella asks if he's uncomfortable. Rosaline knows this is a lie, though, but she gets worked up overthinking things. Little does she know that Kahur is looking at her with a concerned look. Suddenly, he gets up and puts his hand on her forehead, asking if she's sick. Rosaline admits that she needs rest, though she frantically asks if he plans to stay for tea. Stay with Ella, that is. He says no way, reminding her of the rule that wherever he is, he must also have his secretary, so he can't be in a place without her. Is that romantic? Are we counting that one as such? Anyway, they excuse themselves, and Ella grabs Rosaline's hand in a friendly gesture, but it was nothing like that. She reminds her of the lots of things they have to talk about, along with a friendly smile. Rosaline sees through it, though. Meanwhile, Rosaline gets teased by the Emperor, but they eventually talk about Ella. Kahur asks if she's really her friend. Rosaline lies, though she admits she doesn't know if Ella is backed by the Empress Dowager. Suddenly, the Emperor asks if he can have Ella killed. Picking up on their conversation, Rosaline can't believe Cahir just casually asked if he could put Ella to death. For one, Rosaline knows Ella is destined for him, but she can't really say that. So when Cahir asks her if there's something he should know about, she ends up asking him to stop and pushing him out. Afterwards, the Emperor asks Derek with investigating what's going on with Rosaline, saying she's been acting weird lately and her health isn't looking good. When Derek asks if it's because of work, Cahir refutes it, saying he can tolerate mistakes. Derek certainly doesn't think so. Although the chief secretary suggests that Rosaline's poor health may be because of fatigue. With the banquet, she's had a lot of workload. A vacation wouldn't help though, as Cahir states she refused every instance in which he gave her one. It's also why he thinks she loves work. Anyway, when Derek suggests sending for a doctor instead, the Emperor ordered to have all the Imperial doctors be gathered by tomorrow. Another order is also to investigate Ella and her connections with the Empress Dowager and Rosaline. Unfortunately, this means overtime for poor Derek. The following morning, Rosaline can't help but be overwhelmed by the sheer number of doctors passionately trying to treat her. It's not out of kindness or concern, though, but because the Emperor had apparently threatened to have their medical titles removed if they failed to treat Rosaline. A little crazy, yeah, I know. She had quite a time to send them home, and she finds Cahir by himself at the library. The Emperor jokes about dismissing the doctors, but all Rosaline could notice was that he was reading the book she had to report on. He initially asked her to report on the remaining pages, but when the temple case concerning the Velos priest came up, Cahir instead asked her to go and forget about writing the report, to decrease her workload too. The Emperor is called for a sudden meeting with Duke Pashita, and so Rosaline prepares to meet with the Velos priest, Anthony, the second male lead of the novel. Rosaline starts off with a very formal greeting when she meets Anthony Leos, and the latter does the same as well. As of right now, Anthony is a high priest, but in the novel, he ends up as the Pope of Velos, becoming an ally of Atheos. He will be known as a man with a beautiful face and a merciful personality, but he will also fall in love with Ella. Meanwhile, Anthony gets dumbstruck at the sight of Rosaline, making her ask if something's wrong. He can't help but compliment her beauty, liking it to the goddess Atheusis. On the other hand, Rosaline is shocked because this scene happens in the book, but she's not in it. Ella is. Maybe you're the main character now, Rosaline? Rosaline thinks this is just a thing Anthony says when meeting women, but thinking about it, he isn't like that. He doesn't even hug Ella when she gets close to his chest in the novel. Anyway, they went back to business. Velos is a kingdom maintained by donations from saints, along with money from priests and Holy Night missions. Rosaline is there to assure the construction of their temple in Cahir's territory, and it will be handled carefully. However, Rosaline can't help but notice Anthony's handsomeness. If Cahir is sexy and charismatic, then he's gentle and soft. Still, he'll have an unrequited love for Ella. Anthony catches this spaced-out moment of Rosaline's. What are you thinking about, girl? You're there for work! The two then strike up a conversation wherein Rosaline, pretending she's referring to a friend, asks advice for Cahir. Thankfully, the Emperor is gaining his humanity back gradually. He also says that she should treat him like a son. Her concerns next come to Ella and her feelings, even though she knows her destiny is with Cahir. Anthony says the feeling is jealousy. Anthony repeats that what concerns Rosaline is jealousy, likening it to the many stories about mothers hindering their son's love. Since this scenario, he told Rosaline to treat the other as a son. This newfound perspective enlightens Rosaline, nothing less from the future Pope. She concludes that her heart was so bothered because she's like a mother watching over her child, the Emperor. I don't think that's it, Rosaline. Anyway, she notices that it was sunset, a view which she finds similar to the Emperor's eyes. Rosaline wonders what Cahir's doing, while Anthony hopes his advice helped her. The two then say their formal goodbyes, but before they part ways, Anthony advises that a mother doesn't just oppose a marriage, and usually their intuition is right. Now back at Cahir's estate, Rosaline, like she's trying to convince herself, concludes that she and the Emperor's relationship is like family. She's then greeted by a maid, who she asks if Cahir's looking for her. He isn't, but the maid actually came to deliver a letter from her supposed friend. Rosaline gets a bit frantic, saying she's going out and not to tell the Emperor about it. It took quite some time convincing to allow James to accompany her too. Actually, it was Ella who sent the letter and had asked her to meet in a local pub. They start talking, and eventually Ella asks for her cooperation since she knows how the novel ends. But remembering Anthony's words and Kahur's harsh life, she bravely refuses, causing an outburst from Ella. Ella angrily questions Rosaline's right to interfere with the story, with Rosaline, the unbothered queen that she is, merely states that it's not her, but Ella's doing. Right to her face, she says she isn't anything like the original Ella. The supposed female lead raises her hand, attempting to hit Rosaline, but James catches it, all the while drawing his blade near the attacker's throat. Rosaline calms James down, and she continues on Ella, saying she'll never be like the original, and that was the last time she'll save her from a blade. Brave Rosaline is cool Rosaline. Meanwhile, the Emperor sits by himself in his room with a glass of wine in his hands. He thinks about the recent visit of Duke Pashita. Apparently, the reason he rushed over was because Karlan, the Emperor's little brother, will be married soon. Kahur himself finds it hard to believe that the kid has become of age. Still, it isn't a threat to his throne, but the Duke hints it would be if Karlan produces a son first, so the Emperor must get married first. Kahur has some unspoken reservations about this, though, as he thinks of his mother. Nonetheless, Duke Pashita says emotions shouldn't be his concerns, but urges him to consider political interests and imperial security. It still vexes him thinking about it in the present, but he distracts himself by looking at Rosaline's empty desk, noting she must be resting well. As for Ella, she rushes back home where Jackie, her maid, worriedly asks where she was as the capital isn't like their estate. However, she looks back to her and says she would like to be alone. Ella goes into her room and frantically questions how all this could be happening to her. She proclaims that she's come so far and everything is supposedly hers. Looking a little crazy there, Ella. Anyway, she grabs her copy of the novel, saying she was quote-unquote the first one and Rosaline wasn't a problem the last time. What is she talking about and what does it mean? Ella, like Rosaline, is from another world. One day, she fell asleep, and when she woke up, she became the female lead of the novel she's been reading. It was incredibly easy to live as Ella Paulos, since she already knows the story, and everything happened exactly like the novel. She and Kahur met, and it was love at first sight. They married, and they had kids too, but the novel ends with their happy ending, so Ella doubts if her relationship with Kahur will crumble away. She promises to herself that no one will take this away from her, but unfortunately, she seems to take it quite literally. One afternoon, she asks her husband for a vacation, just the two of them, and Kahur suggests they take their children too since they're small enough and that they'll get lonely without them. As Kahur goes ahead to their kids, no smile forms on Ella's face. Days pass and Ella and Kahur meet in a hallway. She runs to him but points out that she hasn't been to the Imperial Palace. He also asks her to pay attention to their kids more since they want to see her. That's when Ella explodes in unjust anger, selfishly saying she wants him to love her only and not their kids. She should be the most important thing to him. Oh wow, that's messed up. Months pass and Ella gets worse. She approaches Kahur and slaps the maid with him. When he stops her, Ella hits him too. After that, Kahur had her taken away. However, she was given a second chance and relived the story again. Still, she notices tiny differences, like how the ball where she and Kahur met changed from white to black. Ella still doesn't get her happy ending though, as this time Rosaline exists as an obstacle. She angrily tears away the pages containing Rosaline's name. Meanwhile, Kahur is still awake, even though Derek notes it's late in the evening. The Emperor instead asks him if he's getting married, to which Derek replies yes to. It seems the Emperor is troubled by the thought of having to marry, but as Derek points out, it's unavoidable now. A new day dawns and Rosaline is back to work. She still thinks about the incident with Ella though, but she finds strength in the fact that the story has changed this much. Perhaps Ella is no longer the heroine. Right as she is about to knock, Kahur opened the door first, already ready. He asks Rosaline for the meeting, and though begrudgingly, heads to the meeting himself. Still, Rosaline can't help but be proud of his growth when he didn't attend administrative meetings at first. Kahur is steadily becoming a perfect king. Proud as a mother that Rosaline. Unfortunately, not all imperial advisors would agree to her, as the first thing that comes out of the supposed changed king is if they'd all like to be killed over the tax issue. He starts saying he'll go himself and boldly questions those who say no to him. Instead, the council members look to Rosaline for help, which Kahur notices. After the meeting, he asks her directly if something's different about her. He even asks why the executives looked at her. It was a call for help! But when he asked why he himself can't take his eyes off her, she can't help but blush. For now, she thinks that her heart must be sick, judging by the way she feels. Kahur is so unintentionally romantic, and both of them don't realize they're in love. They have one more guest, though, and it is the High Priest Anthony Leos. The three talk over a meal, in which Anthony gets surprised by the knowledge of the Emperor about the doctrine of his faith. Kahur states he takes interest because it was a faith that's building a temple in his territory, and the men exchange pleasantries for the temple project. Although by chance, the priest catches Rosaline glancing at the Emperor. Then it hit him. Were the pieces of advice Rosaline sought about her and Kahur? Later that day, Kahur opens up about Rosaline's 2-week vacation. Rosaline is glad to hear about it. After all, she worked so hard for the last 5 years so that even without her presence, the Empire will be able to run without a problem. On the outside, it seems like she's been longing for it, as evident on her face. She's really just proud of her achievements, y'all. However, Kahur interprets it in a different way, granting her another week of leave. Rosaline seems pretty much worried. She was about to take a break and find out about Ella, believing that she wouldn't give up easily on Kahur. Also, she knows how much Kahur hates the Queen, yet she still decided to team up with her. 3 weeks aren't enough to investigate her, so she confidently requests for 4 and 5 weeks. Still, Kahur's decision is final. Rosaline beams with a graceful smile, realizing that he's unconsciously treating her like how he negotiates with the administrative of the Empire. Just then, Kahur smiles, thinking how it makes her more lovable to notice every single detail about him. Wait, what? He suddenly feels a chilly sensation crawling up his spine. He can't believe what he thinks about. He doesn't even know what love is. Rosaline might be a good teacher, you know? Worried, Rosaline leans closer, asking if he's uncomfortable anywhere. However, Kahur's attention focuses on how her eyes innocently sparkle with worry and how her lips softly curve at every word she utters. Kahur denies himself, thinking that he must be going crazy due to how overworked he is lately. He stands from his seat and leads her outside, clarifying that his decision is irreversible. A day later, as Rosaline and Hui talk about her vacation, she turns around to see who's calling her name. It's the High Priest. The High Priest approaches her to say goodbye. Rosaline feels a bit disappointed since she really enjoyed talking to him, especially that one advice that helped make up her mind about Ella. The High Priest blushes, confessing that she is the first person that came to his mind when leaving Atheos, and so he invites her to have some tea before leaving with the intention of asking her about her friend. Rosaline invites Anthony to a coffee shop where he clearly didn't expect the coffee to be that strong. Pardon us, my dear, High Priest, it's the signature of us who always work overtime. Just then, Anthony gets straight to the point. Upon mentioning her friend, Rosaline visibly flinches. By this juncture, Anthony is already aware that the story pertains to her rather than her friend. Rosaline extends an apology for the deception, expressing that it was not her intention to mislead him. Anthony, however, reassures her that he harbors no ill feelings about it. Instead, he further clarifies that excessive love of parents can sometimes turn into poison, and that the most important role of a parent is knowing when to let go. After all, letting go is the right thing to do because parents can't cater their children their entire lives. Oh my, he's such a wise man. Suddenly, he glances around, ensuring that no one is eavesdropping on their conversation. Leaning closer, he discreetly shares the circulating rumor about Kahur's nobles actively seeking a noble lady to become his partner. In contrast, Rosaline remains unfazed. It's a tale that has circulated for years, and she's long accustomed to it. Undeterred, Anthony continues, asserting that if her feelings for him persist, she may find herself shaken in the future. Moreover, he warns of the potential for her judgment to be clouded by love, possibly leading her to make regrettable decisions. Aw, he's really concerned for her. However, Rosaline thinks otherwise. She won't do something that would lead her to death. However, given how her own mother strangely changes her attitude towards her sister-in-law, her resolve to leave Kahur's side strengthens. Later that day, Rosaline finally reunites with her loving family. As her mother warmly embraces her, she discovers the same cozy and warm feeling she experiences with Kahur is mirrored in her family's embrace. Though she almost deluded herself, with Anthony's guidance, she manages to organize her thoughts. As they settle on the sofa, her father gently reminds her of the promise made 5 years ago. In his hand is a marriage offer intended for Rosaline. After 3 weeks, Rosaline goes back to work in the Imperial Palace. It turns out that her parents wanted her to quit being a secretary and just live a simple life with her soon-to-be husband. Kahur notices that she's been spacing out a lot during meetings. Due to that, she isn't responding well when called. He thinks that maybe it's because she's overloaded with work, so he asks her if she needs something. Rosaline thinks it's a good chance for that since she worked herself to death for 5 years. She deserves to live a happy life. She holds a tight grip on her dress, thinking that this is her only chance to leave being a secretary. However, as soon as she confidently asks to quit, Kaher's expression turns sour. He approaches her with a death glare and cups her chin, asking if she wishes to die. Dun, dun, dun. He then leans closer, whispering that she must die if she wants to quit. Does this mean she has to work for the rest of her life like that? Of course, Rosaline doesn't want to. Derek enters the room, observing the intense exchange between the two, aware that a small mistake could prove fatal. Despite Derek's attempt to inform Kaher of the awaiting crowd for their meeting, Kaher dismisses him. Rosaline believes it's only fair to enjoy a comfortable life after her dedicated service to the Imperial Palace. However, Kaher remains unconvinced, seeing her resignation as tantamount to signing her own death wish. That night, Rosaline struggles to sleep, grappling with disbelief that Kaher won't allow her to quit. While reflecting on her time as a secretary, she acknowledges it isn't all bad, but the realization that she can't remain in that role indefinitely leaves her feeling like her aspirations are slipping away. Still, she won't allow herself to live being a secretary forever. Oh, I have a better idea, Rosaline. How about becoming the Empress instead? In Atheus, the female nobility cannot work when they get married. Now thoughts of dating someone lingers on Rosaline's mind. However, anyone in the palace would look like mushrooms compared to the hot and sexy emperor. Her standards have gotten higher because of him. She then approaches the window, thinking how strange it is that Kaher is not letting her go. Normally, he wouldn't obsess over people, and in the novel, the only person he's obsessed with was Ella. Rosaline's losing her mind, constantly thinking of a reason why Kaher is acting strange. Meanwhile, Kaher's not in a good mood. His expression turns dark, still in disbelief that Rosaline wants to quit her job. Well, we can't blame him. Rosaline's skills are exceptional. Suddenly, Kaher's attention shifts to Derek, who bluntly asserts that the investigation into Rosaline is remarkably clean, indicating no suspicious activities. Kaher, visibly irritated, taps his throne while shooting Derek a stern glare, as if Derek missed his point. In frustration, Kaher declares that even after 5 years of working closely with Rosaline, Derek still doesn't truly know her. The revelation? Rosaline is deeply in love with him. Excuse me, sir? Let's not assume otherwise. Derek can't believe what he just said. Suddenly, Kaher turns to Derek, seeking advice on how to change Rosaline's heart. Anxious, Derek recalls Rosaline's recent marriage proposal. Kaher assumes it's due to Roy's impending divorce, a situation that would bring great dishonor. Consequently, Rosaline contemplates leaving to avoid tarnishing the imperial family's reputation. Derek clarifies that the proposal wasn't from Roy, but for Rosaline herself. The revelation that someone is actively seeking her in marriage leaves Kaher in disbelief. With tightly clenched fists, he coldly orders Derek to investigate the Spiedo family thoroughly, sparing no detail. Derek points out the need for a cause to warrant such an investigation, but Kaher insists that the Emperor's order is sufficient cause. The thought of Rosaline leaving to marry a nobleman and even bearing a child are far worse than a nightmare. Is this because no one can surpass Rosaline's skill or pure jealousy? What do you guys think? A few days later, Kaher remains fixated on the Spiedo's family proposal to Rosaline, contemplating how to punish them. Sensing his displeasure, Rosaline hesitates to discuss her resignation and instead hands him a report on the temple construction site. The document includes a proposal for a pretzel square, a symbol of inclusivity for foreigners and diverse religions. To her surprise, Kaher agrees to the suggestion, and Rosaline feels a sense of pride, noting his changed approach. In the past, he would have made decisions unilaterally. She wonders if this transformation marks the emergence of a wise king in the annals of history. However, unbeknownst to Rosaline, Kaher is infuriated by the idea that she might be solely preoccupied with thoughts of marriage. In an attempt to assert his claim over her, he instructs her to find a pink diamond necklace, considering it not a gift, but a bonus. Rosaline is too stunned to speak. In the entire continent, one can only mine 3 or 4 pieces of this rare gem in a year. The question is, why her? But Kaher isn't giving it to her because she needs it, but because he wants to do it. He then orders her to bring it to him as soon as possible. Hold on, isn't it weird to order the recipient to prepare her gift? He then cups her chin and asks if she doesn't want a pink diamond necklace because of her resistance. In response, Rosaline nods, confidently expressing her wish to leave. This provokes a tense reaction from Kahur, determined not to let her resign, even if it means facing her defiance. At lunch, Derek reassures Kahur that there's nothing to worry about regarding the Spiedo family. Unsatisfied, Kahur demands the tiniest traces of dirt on them. Derek reports a legal but lucrative fur trade 3 years ago where the Spiedos amassed considerable wealth. Kahur smirks, dismissing it as more than a tiny flaw. In his eyes, this significant business maneuver is too big to overlook, especially when considering marriage to Rosaline. At a time when the Empire's taxes were already reduced, the nobles proposed cutting back on relief for the poor, which included support for orphans and widows, an offense punishable by death. Despite the considerable time that has passed, Kahur opts for a lenient punishment to resolve the matter. He instructs Derek to have Sir Spiedo join the Order of the Knights and be stationed at the border for 5 years. While this punishment is comparatively lighter than Kahur's previous decisions, it remains a harsh sentence for Sir Spiedo, who has dedicated his life to the pursuit of knowledge through reading books. He really knows how to achieve his ways no matter what. A day later, Rosaline receives a letter from her mother revealing that the marriage proposal has been cancelled because Count Spiedo's son volunteered to be a knight stationed at the border. The sudden turn of events seems too suspicious to be a mere coincidence, prompting Rosaline to discreetly ask Derek to follow her. In a private conversation, Derek admits to orchestrating Sir Spiedo's departure. However, he fabricates a story, claiming that Kahur is monitoring the aristocracy's market monopoly and taking necessary measures. Rosaline, puzzled and unaware of the truth, questions why she wasn't informed. Despite the desire to reveal the actual reason, Derek refrains, fearing Kahur's wrath. Rosaline senses that there's more to the situation than Kahur's concern for the Empire's reputation, but she decides to dismiss it as a coincidence. During a meeting, Kahur feigns ignorance about the situation, questioning Rosaline's tardiness. With the engagement now broken off, he seizes the opportunity to command her to sit down for a very important discussion. How about we sit on your lap too? Just kidding. As soon as the others leave the room, Kahur inquires about the pink diamond necklace. Rosaline is doing her best to acquire it, but due to its decreasing yield from the mines, there's still no progress at all. Kahur scoffs, saying he didn't know how precious it is since he has a lot of embedded on his crown. He sarcastically apologizes for hogging it all to himself, so he attempts to carve it out of the crown instead so that she won't struggle to find one. Sometimes I doubt if he loves his crown as much as he loves himself. Rosaline is quick to stop him from doing so. The crown contains the goddess Atheist's tears, so he can't tear it apart. He squeezes her hand and promises to hand the pink diamond necklace by tomorrow, all while wishing to herself to hit him in the head. Kahur is just a manipulator, but we still love him. A day later, Rosaline is surprised that the necklace is already ready. The store owner says that Kahur personally designed it. It's a simple and elegant design that suits the diamond very well. Meanwhile, at the training grounds, Kahur is disappointed that the knights are weak. Suddenly, someone arrives, saying that it's because he's too strong. Kahur recognizes Rosaline's scent. Like always, her scent comes before her body. Kahur agrees to her statement, further explaining that if they want to be an Imperial Guard, they should at least be strong like Hamburg, one of the continent's best knights. It's funny how his ears twitch at the mention of his name. But then again, how can a genius understand an ordinary person? In order to divert his attention, Rosaline expresses the good news. The diamond necklace is ready. Kahur asks her to hand it over so he can check. Looking at it, it came better than he thought. He then asks her to turn around so he can put it on her. Rosaline is confused as to why he wants to put the necklace on her with everyone's eyes watching them. So she resists so that she can put it on her own. But Kahur won't let her. He'll give it to her the way he wants to. Rosaline turns around, realizing how stubborn Kahur is. He then instructs her to move her hair, or else he'll tell everyone to look at them. Ah! He is a terrible romantic! Rosaline has no choice but to obey. As she moves her hair, he asks what soap or perfume she's using to emit such good fragrance. Surprisingly, she doesn't use any of those. She then asks him to hurry up, but even locking it seems harder than he thought. Is it because he's nervous? For the love of God, just admit it if you have feelings for her! He has fought 100 soldiers and won against thousands of enemies. He was never nervous then, why would he be now? Perhaps is it because of her scent? As soon as he's done, he leans closer, their faces barely inches apart. Rosaline unintentionally pushes him, but he grabs her hand, pulling her closer to him as his hands rest around her waist. He's unintentionally flirting with her. Rosaline reminds him that the people are now looking at them, but with just a glare, Hamburg understands the assignment. He starts smelling her neck, curious of her scent. If it was me, I probably would have fainted by now. Rosaline feels so nervous as he whispers in her ear. Stuttering, she reveals that she uses powder when taking a bath. But the way he acts now, her body is getting hot. It might burst. However, he isn't done yet. He further questions what she will do after she quits her job. At this moment, Rosaline can't stop blushing, her heart pounding. Normally, she could answer this question right away, but now, she's getting indecisive. Rosaline removes his hand from her waist and takes a step back, stating that after she quit, she wants to enjoy life. She wants to go to tea parties with different families, travel, study, buy pretty dresses, and learn to embroidery. This is what she's been planning for the last 5 years, yet his reaction tells her how plain they are. So she clarifies that she's going to live normally. Still, Kahir doesn't understand how precious one's life is. Suddenly, Derek arrives with his crown. His request to meet with the family is all ready. Kahir smirks and pats her head, saying that he will listen to her explanation next time. Because he's been living a luxurious life, he obviously doesn't know what a normal life is. Just then, the soldiers flinch at what they see. Kahir, the tyrant emperor, lowers his head as Rosaline puts on his crown. That's right, he's just bowing down for the future empress. Looking at him from the back, Rosaline can't help but feel proud of her well-raised tyrant. At the meeting, everyone looks at him, waiting for his praise. After all, they worked so hard for it. Back then, they couldn't even make eye contact because of Kahir's narcissistic persona, but he's no longer the tyrant he once was. Suddenly, Duke Pashita suggests that Kahir should now concentrate on fortifying the power of the imperial family by selecting an empress. Can I just volunteer myself? Just kidding. We totally love our Rosaline. The Empire's people want a warm and caring empress. Rosaline realizes that since he's not the biological son of the current empress, his position can be compromised anytime. So Kahir asks her if she also wants him to marry. Rosaline agrees to the Duke, but what if Ella becomes the selected empress? Still, she'll do everything to ensure that won't happen, so she should focus on him for now, and so she agrees with everyone else. Disappointed, Kahir misunderstands that Rosaline wants to do some political marriage for power. He slams his hands against his throne and informs the people to prepare a selection process. As Kahir exits, selfish desires surface among those present. Hours later, he curiously questions if his marriage can be a normal one, perhaps seeking a genuine connection amidst the political machinations surrounding the selection process. I feel so sorry for what he's been through as a child. That must have been the reason why he doesn't want to marry. Rosaline attempts to reassure him, asserting that their marriage won't be a normal one because, as the son of the Empire, he is destined to marry the moon of the Empire. Usually, he might seek a loophole, but this time he turns around, clearly unconvinced by her explanation. Instead, he questions how she plans to live a normal life. Blushing, Rosaline proceeds to enumerate her vision of a normal life: meeting a good man, dating, and eventually having a child after marriage. Before she can elaborate further, Kahir interrupts, requesting her to repeat what she just said. Rosaline didn't expect him to make her repeat what she just said. When she enumerates it again, it's no longer the same as the first one. Weirdly, she doesn't remember that part. Disappointed is an understatement. She's naming things, but in his case, he will soon go through a marriage he doesn't want. I suggest he marries Rosaline so he won't regret it throughout his life. Kahir approaches and warns her not to get married before he does. But even after his marriage, he still won't let her quit. When it comes to Rosaline, he's being unreasonable at times. That night, James hears footsteps inside Kahir's bedroom. Upon opening the door, he finds Kahir unharmed and without a single scratch. James assumes the would-be assassin has already fled. However, who would dare to attempt an assassination on the ruler of the Empire, a man known for eliminating threats without hesitation? Minutes later, James returns with Derek. Kahir instructs Derek to arrange a grand and lavish tea party for the afternoon. Age-wise, it's around Rosaline's. It seems like a how to win a girl's heart scenario, doesn't it? But for him, he just wants to keep the talented around. Given how rushed and big the tea party is, Derek pinches his cheeks to see if he's just dreaming or what. Too bad, he isn't. No lovey-dovey with Hui tonight for you, Derek. One more thing, Kahir asks Derek to prepare a renowned teacher to help Rosaline practice proper manners. The following day, Kahur eagerly waits by the door as soon as Rosaline completes her tasks. While organizing some documents, she notices her hair is a bit messy. Ingenuously, she grabs a quill and ties her hair around it, creating a messy bun that surprisingly enhances her beauty. Just as she admires her impromptu hairstyle, Kahur suggests she change her dress because he can't see anything. He's not seeing what? Comment down below what you think the Emperor is referring to. So guys, what do you think of this story so far? Please subscribe and turn on notifications for updates on this and all our other stories, so you can be the first to find out when they're out. Thank you so much for your support. See you in the next one!